satisfactory system is that based upon the law of the octave. The sense of hearing has a much wider scope than that of sight, for whereas the ear can register from 9 to 11 octaves of sound, the eye is restricted to the cognition of but 7 fundamental color tones, or one tone short of the octave. Red, when posited as the lowest color tone in the scale of chromatics, thus corresponds to do, the first note of the musical scale. Continuing the analogy, orange corresponds to re, yellow to mi, green to fa, blue to sol, indigo to la, and violet to ct. The eighth color tone necessary to complete the scale should be the higher octave of red, the first color tone. The accuracy of the above arrangement is attested by two striking facts. When the three fundamental notes of the musical scale, the first, the third, and the fifth, correspond with the three primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. To the seventh, and least perfect, note of the musical scale corresponds with purple, the least perfect tone of the color scale. In the Principles of Light and Color, Edmund E. Babbitt confirms the correspondence of the color and musical scales as C is at the bottom of the musical scale and made with the coarsest waves of air, so is red at the bottom of the chromatic scale and made with the coarsest waves of luminous ether. As the musical note B, the seventh note of the scale, requires 45 vibrations of air every time, the note C at the lower end of the scale requires 24, or but little over half as many. So does extreme violet require about 300 trillions of vibrations of ether in a second, while extreme red requires only about 450 trillions, which also are but little more than half as many. When one musical octave is finished, another one commences and progresses with just twice as many vibrations as were used in the first octave, and so the same notes are repeated on a finer scale. In the same way, when the scale of colors visible to the ordinary eye is completed in the violet, another octave of finer invisible colors, with just twice as many vibrations, will commence and progress on precisely the same law. When the colors are related to the 12 signs of the zodiac, they are arranged as the spokes of a wheel. To Aries is assigned pure red. To Taurus, red-orange. To Gemini, pure orange. To Cancer, orange-yellow. To Leo, pure yellow. To Virgo, yellow-green. To Libra, pure green. To Scorpio, green-blue. To Sagittarius, pure blue. To Capricorn, blue-violet. To Aquarius, pure violet. And to Pisces, violet-red. In expounding the Eastern system of esoteric philosophy, H.P. Blavatsky relates the colors to the septenary constitution of man and the 7 states of matter as follows: color principles of man: states of matter, violet chaya, or etheric double ether; indigo higher manas, or spiritual intelligence; critical state called air; blue auric envelope; steam or vapor; green lower manas, or animal soul; critical state yellow; buddhi, or spiritual soul; water; orange prana, or life principle; critical state red; kama rupa, or seat of animal life; ice. This arrangement of the colors of the spectrum and the musical notes of the octave necessitates a different grouping of the planets in order to preserve their proper tone and color analogies. Thus do becomes Mars, Re, the Sun; Mi, Mercury; Fa, Saturn; Sol, Jupiter; La, Venus; Ct, the Moon. See the ES instructions. Insert the 4 elements and their consonantal intervals. From Flood's De Musica Mundana. In this diagram, Flood has divided each of the 4 primary elements into 3 subdivisions. The first division of each element is the grossest, partaking somewhat of the substance directly inferior to itself, except in the case of the earth, which has no state inferior to itself. The second division consists of the element in its relatively pure state, while the third division is that condition wherein the element partakes somewhat of the substance immediately superior to itself. For example, the lowest division of the element of water is sedimentary, as it contains earth substance in solution. The second division represents water in its most common state, salty, as in the case of the ocean. And the third division is water in its purest state, free from salt. The harmonic interval assigned to the lowest division of each element is 1 tone, to the central division also a tone, but to the higher division a half tone because it partakes of the division immediately above it. Flood emphasizes the fact that as the elements ascend in series of 2½ tones, the diatessaron is the dominating harmonic interval of the elements. Continued. Fishes, insects, animals, reptiles and birds. Part 1. The creatures inhabiting the water, air, and earth were held in veneration by all races of antiquity. Realizing that visible bodies are only symbols of invisible forces, the ancients worshipped the divine power through the lower kingdoms of nature, because those less evolved and more simply constituted creatures responded most readily to the creative impulses of the gods. The sages of old studied living things to a point of realization that God is most perfectly understood through a knowledge of His supreme handiwork, animate and inanimate nature. Every existing creature manifests some aspect of the intelligence or power of the Eternal One, who can never be known save through a study and appreciation of His numbered but inconceivable parts. When a creature is chosen, therefore, to symbolize to the concrete human mind some concealed abstract principle, it is because its characteristics demonstrate this invisible principle in visible action. Fishes, insects, animals, reptiles, and birds appear in the religious symbolism of nearly all nations, because the forms and habits of these creatures and the media in which they exist closely relate them to the various generative and germinative powers of nature, which were considered as prima facie evidence of divine omnipresence. The early philosophers and scientists, realizing that all life has its origin in water, chose the fish as a symbol of the life germ. The fact that fishes are most prolific makes this simile still more apt. While the early priests may not have possessed the instruments necessary to analyze the spermatozoon, they concluded by deduction that it resembled a fish. Fishes were sacred to the Greeks and Romans, being connected with the worship of Aphrodite Venus. An interesting survival of pagan ritualism is found in the custom of eating fish on Friday. Freya, in whose honor the day was named, was the Scandinavian Venus, and this day was sacred among many nations to the goddess of beauty and fecundity. This analogy further links the fish with the procreative mystery. Friday is also sacred to the followers of the Prophet Muhammad. The word Nun means both fish and growth, and as Iman says, the Jews were led to victory by the son of the fish whose other names were Joshua and Jesus the Savior. Nun is still the name of a female devotee of the Christian faith. Among early Christians 3 fishes were used to symbolize the Trinity, and the fish is also one of the 8 sacred symbols of the great Buddha. It is also significant that the dolphin should be sacred to both Apollo the solar savior and Neptune. It was believed that this fish carried shipwrecked sailors to heaven on its back. The dolphin was accepted by the early Christians as an emblem of Christ, because the pagans had viewed this beautiful creature as a friend and benefactor of man. The heir to the throne of France, the Dauphin, may have secured his title from this ancient pagan symbol of the divine preservative power. The first advocates of Christianity likened converts to fishes, who at the time of baptism returned again into the sea of Christ. Primitive peoples believed the sea and land were inhabited by strange creatures, and early books on zoology contain curious illustrations of composite beasts, reptiles, and fishes, which did not exist at the time the medieval authors compiled these voluminous books. In the ancient initiatory rituals of the Persian, Greek, and Egyptian mysteries, the priests disguised themselves as composite creatures, thereby symbolizing different aspects of human consciousness. They used birds and reptiles as emblems of their various deities, often creating forms of grotesque appearance and assigning to them imaginary traits, habits, and places of domicile, all of which were symbolic of certain spiritual and transcendental truths thus concealed from the profane. The phoenix made its nest of incense and flames. The unicorn had the body of a horse, the feet of an elephant, and the tail of a wild boar. The upper half of the centaur's body was human and the lower half equine. The pelican of the Hermetists fed its young from its own breast, and to this bird were assigned other mysterious attributes which could have been true only allegorically. Though regarded by many writers of the Middle Ages as actual living creatures, none of these, the pelican excepted, ever existed outside the symbolism of the mysteries. Possibly they originated in rumors of animals then little known. In the temple, however, they became a reality, for there they signified the manifold characteristics of man's nature. The mantichora has certain points in common with the hyena. The unicorn may have been the single-horned rhinoceros. To the student of the secret wisdom, these composite animals and birds simply represent various forces working in the invisible worlds. This is a point which nearly all writers on the subject of medial monsters seem to have overlooked. Sievela's assault